Привет всем, с вами я, Jenny at College Russian. Welcome to our live stream. Today we are doing a really awesome song by one of the best Russian songwriters of all time. He was requested by a lot of people and he's considered one of the most important people in Russian music, and you really should know his music if you're learning Russian. Problem is, he's a very amazing poet, and a lot of his song lyrics can be pretty hard to understand for the average Russian learner. So today we're choosing one of the easier songs, and we're gonna break it down and kind of simplify it. And yeah, it's very clever. It's a very smart song. The rhyming schemes are super creative and very interesting. So we're going to talk about those. Something I wanted to talk about is when I was taking a Russian poetry class in college, the teacher talked about how in Russian, what's considered a superior rhyme is when it's two different parts of speech, because the language is highly inflected. So we'll talk about that. I'll show you some of his rhyming schemes and kind of explain why they're so brilliant, because again, he's a very brilliant writer. I like to kind of compare him to Bob Dylan, in that in many ways he's a better poet than he is a singer. And you'll здравствуйте, он говорит, доброго времени вам суток из Израиля. Hand pink waving. Great to see you. I don't know if you're shalom, if you're a shalom or a marhaba. I don't know which language you prefer. Maybe русский. Вот это все очень хорошо. Добро пожаловать всем. So we're going to talk about Vladimir Vysotsky. As I was saying, he reminds me a lot of a Russian Bob Dylan. In that, you know how Bob Dylan doesn't really have a very good voice, but he's a brilliant writer. And so we still listen to his music just because his lyrics are so profound and beautiful. It's obvious that Vladimir Vysotsky was a smoker. You'll understand what I'm talking about when you listen to his music. He's got definitely a smoker's voice. So let me know if you think, let me know in the comments if you think that Vladimir Vysotsky was in fact the best Russian songwriter of all time. A lot of, again, similar to Bob Dylan, he won a Nobel Prize for literature even. So, and I know that Vysotsky won prizes as well. So again, a lot of similarities between Bob Dylan and Vladimir Vysotsky. So he lived from 1938 to 1980. A lot of his music was actually censored during the Soviet Union. And нет, наверное, скорее всего, Олег, не надо шутить про геев, потому что вот YouTube часто делает разные, как, я не знаю, вот запреты на это. То есть, anyway, so у меня есть вопрос, кстати, от чего умер Владимир Высоцкий? Мне интересно, кто знает, потому что я искала в Гугле, и я нашла много разных версий. То есть мне интересно, от чего он умер. Да? So he lived from 1938 to 1980. I wasn't quite sure what he died of. Maybe something to do with drugs. I researched it in Google and I couldn't quite figure out like the final diagnosis of what he died of. So again, he started out as an actor and then kind of moved over to music. And in fact, he was in this movie, Vertical, and that's how he actually wrote this song that we're talking about today. That song was featured in this movie. So we're going to be talking about that. And essentially it's a movie about mountains. And so there's some talking about mountains in today's song. Да, Серж говорит, стримы стали чаще выходить. Да, у меня есть такая цель выложить лайвстрим раза в неделю, да, то есть потому что я хочу почаще. И теперь, кстати, мой канал и мои частные уроки – это теперь моя главная работа. Раньше это была моя вторая, конечно, материнство – это самая важная и самая первая работа. Потом еще работа в университете. И потом третья работа – это вот мой канал и мои частные уроки. И вот, да, и поэтому у меня теперь больше свободного времени, чтобы работать над своим каналам. То есть, да. Так, хорошо. So, вот Serge says, есть версия, что КГБ отравил. So, there's a version that the KGB poisoned him, and that they put him on drugs. But, so he says he's 100% sure in that. Interesting. I couldn't necessarily find any information about it, but это не очень важно. Вот самое главное — это то, что мы любим его музыку. Самое главное, да? So great. So we're going to talk about the song. As you know, the process. What we do with these live streams is we first go through and we read the lyrics. And you're going to start trying to see what in this you can understand. And what I want you to start doing is thinking, okay, how would I translate those words, right? So if you're learning English, you're looking at these words and trying to think, oh, how is Janie going to translate оказался? How is Janie going to translate вдруг? And then for those of you that are learning Russian, you're starting to think, okay, what do all of these different words mean? What's happening in this sentence? Because you know, in Russian, the word order is crazy, crazy, crazy. And that's why it helps to have somebody walking you through the song and telling you what everything is, because Russian music can be very hard to understand. Oh, somebody here says, так, нет, Боб Дилан, мой любимый американский исполнитель, Владимир Семенович, моей мамой. So he's saying Bob Dylan is his favorite American singer, so that's great. And then this other person is recommending this song by Vysotsky, so you guys are free to go look those up online. Again, there's a million great Vysotsky songs, same as Bob Dylan. Again, and same as Bob Dylan, because Vladimir Vysotsky doesn't have a very good voice, a lot of people will sing his songs. Same with Bob Dylan, right? His music got covered by a lot of other people. So here we go. Let's start reading the lyrics, and we're going to translate it. Спасибо, Петя. Спасибо за комплимент. Так. Okay, so we're gonna read it through in Russian, and then we're gonna start translating it. So, and by the way, these translations here are going to be weird translations, because I'm going to say word for word, literally what every single word is. So it's gonna look very weird, but then I'll speak a more poetic translation. So here we go. Okay, если друг оказался вдруг, и не друг, и не враг, а так. Okay, so notice how I'm pronouncing these words. For those of you who are learning Russian, if you have a g at the end of a word, it gets devoiced, meaning it turns into a k. K is the whispered version of g. Try whispering the sound g. Try whispering it. Don't let your vocal cords vibrate. And what comes out? K. So in Russian, there's a rule. If you have a voiced consonant at the end of a word, you devoice it. So вдруг, друг, враг. And that's why враг and так are perfect. They're a perfect rhyme because they're both pronounced with a K on the end. Okay, so let's do a little translation here. If a friend turns out to be, okay, or this should be suddenly. So вдруг is suddenly, not a friend and not an enemy. And so оказался, that's a really great verb. Let's go over the grammar. So оказаться is like to turn out to be. Yeah, that's a good word. So and then друг here is the subject of the sentence. So that's just a masculine nominative. Turned out to be not a friend, not an enemy. And so tak is a very all-purpose word. It has lots of translations. Let's see. Oh, wow. Somebody. Oh, спасибо. What? I've never even had a super sticker before. I have no idea what that is. Спасибо. Это очень красиво. Спасибо большое. So оказался is the past tense, and it's a reflexive. Anytime you see ся on the end of a Russian verb, it's a shortened version of себя. And it often translates into English as to be something, to be born, to be located, to be called, okay? And I have an entire video of those that you can search for on my channel as well. Враг, enemy, again, that's getting pronounced with a k sound on the end and not a g because of final consonant devoicing. Кстати, русский это очень влияет на ваше произношение, когда вы говорите по-английски. Например, когда вы говорите например, вещь, thing. Не надо говорить think, говорить thing. Или big, не надо говорить big, big. Вот это очень такой стереотипический русский акцент, когда вы говорите big, hello from Russia, big, это very big, very good. Это очень такой русский акцент, очень влияет на ваше произношение. Надо говорить good, big, с голосом, да? Слышите, там есть голос даже в конце слова. So yeah, you need to say those, you say those, and then in Russian you say those as devoiced. Хорошо, следующий слайд. Okay? Если сразу не разберешь, плох он или хорош. Oh, we got some really fancy language in here. So start translating in your head, especially this verb, разберешь. That's a great verb. Okay, so here we go. Если сразу не разберешь, плох он или хорош. So if right away, no, you can't figure out, right? So if right away you can't quite figure out, is he bad or is he good? Плох он или хорош? And these are short form adjectives, and I've got a whole special slide for them today because I know they're very difficult for people who are learning Russian. So this comes from the verb разбирать. I was so happy when I learned this verb in Russian because we say this phrase a lot in English. I can't figure it out. Did you figure it out? Did you figure it out? Right? So to figure something out, разбирать. And it's obviously the ты conjugation. And then плох is a short form masculine version of the adjective плохой, which you guys all probably know. Хорош is the short form adjective of хороший, but nowadays it can also mean pretty as well. If you say like она хороша or something, он хорош, then that can also mean like handsome as well. So now so now we're going to do a little bit of grammar. Let me know if you know this cultural reference right up here. I'll be very proud of you if you know that cultural reference. So short-form adjectives are used when something is not always like that, but it is right now at the current moment. So, for example, you might say, это пустой стакан. That's an empty cup. That is an empty cup. Or we want to create sort of an is, because remember, Russian doesn't have an is. So we go стакан пуст, right? So the cup is empty. So that's what short form adjectives do, is they create sort of an is, and or they describe a condition that's not permanent necessarily. It's not necessarily a characteristic of the thing. Oh, baby's crying. So some more examples of that are дверь закрыта. Дверь закрыта. So the door is closed. The door is closed. And дверь is a feminine, and that's why we're using a feminine short form adjective. Нельзя открывать закрытую дверь. Right? So this we're using a full adjective because you're just saying like you can't open a closed door. And we don't need an is here. So we don't have an is. We don't have a short form adjective. We're not trying to create an is, whereas right here we are trying to create an is. Another one, for example, ключ нужен. A key is necessary, and or you need a key kind of thing is how we would translate that into English. Or you might say something like у меня нет нужного ключа, but which means I don't have the necessary key. But notice there's no is, so we didn't need a short form adjective. Again, these are really tricky. And by the way, over on my Patreon, for my patrons over there, I have an entire beautiful chart made out for you. So those are the kind of extra materials I create for people over on Patreon. So вот, John говорит, ставим лайки, не стесняемся, девушка для вас старается вообще-то. Спасибо. Вот, спасибо. Да, я очень стараюсь. Спасибо. Так, очень хорошо. So that's kind of how short form adjectives work. They're very difficult, by the way. So, but you'll learn them over time. And there are certain short form adjectives that really they usually are in the short form version. Окей, хорошо. Парня в горе тяни, рискни. Парня в горе тяни, рискни, не бросай одного его. Okay, so start thinking how you're going to translate this. How would you translate парень, горе, тяни, рискни? Oh, this is a hard one. How would you translate this one? Не бросай, не бросай. Okay, so here's the awkward translation. The fellow into the mountains, drag, take a risk. Again, this is word for word. Не бросай одного его. Okay, so I would translate this. And in fact, over on Patreon, I have a better, more poetic translation. So I would say something like, so drag the guy into the mountains, take a risk. Don't just send him off. Don't send him off. Don't throw him there on his own. Okay, let's read. And then here's our grammar here. So парня is the genitive / accusative, because remember, accusative ends up looking like genitive if it is a masculine animate. And he's the direct object of dragging. He's the person you're dragging. So that goes into genitive case. Кстати, раньше, когда я была в России, парень — это был твой, ну как, романтичный друг. Вот. Мне кажется, что теперь они говорят «молодой человек». Это правда? То есть boyfriend как переводится теперь на русский? Потому что раньше я говорила слово «парень». Это мой парень, например. Но мне кажется, что теперь девушки говорят «это мой молодой человек». Или, может быть, всегда было так, и я просто не замечала. Мне интересно. So парень, it used to mean boyfriend. Like when I lived in Russia, you would call your boyfriend your парень. But it can also mean like a guy, a fella, your fellow. And then в горе, that's going into accusative case. And then this is from the verb тянуть, тянуть, and this is the command form. And by the way, any verb that has a нуть ending is going to get this kind of command. Тяни, верни, рискни, etc. So they're saying, yeah, they're saying и так, говорят, молодой человек и парень. And then again, here we have рискнуть, рискнуть, meaning to take a risk. And sure enough, our command form, I told you, anything ending in a нуть, the command is going to be ни, or ните, for example. Then we've got another command from the verb бросать, which translates in a lot of different ways in Russian. It can mean to quit something. It can mean to break up with somebody or dump somebody. And then we're going to say, so don't send him alone. Don't send just him. And again, we're getting genitive / accusative here because you're doing something to him. You're throwing him, and he's a masculine animate. Therefore, he looks like genitive. Okay? So next, пусть он в связке в одной с тобой. These are going to be super interesting to translate. Ты поймешь, кто такой. Okay, so here we go. How would you translate связки? How do you think that would translate? Вот они говорят, без разницы. Парень и молодой человек — это синонимы. Так, so here we go. Пусть. Пусть is a really hard word to translate as well. So here we go. Пусть. So like literally it means, oh, that got messed up. Let him be on one rope with you. So imagine you're going in the mountains and it's dangerous. And if you're in big mountains, you would need to say something like, or you would need to use ropes. If you've ever been in really big, dangerous mountains, you have to connect yourself to the mountain. So he's saying, oh yeah, Serge says, take a chance. Yeah, take a risk, take a chance. You can do that. You could take a chance, definitely. Yeah, that's interesting. So they're saying, let him be on the same rope as you go up in the mountains. So you can see that that's really dangerous. And then if you're on the same rope, then you're going to find out, is he a good guy or is he not? So ты поймешь, you will realize, you'll understand кто такой, who you're working with here. What kind of a guy is this? Who is he? Who is this guy? Is he a friend or is he an enemy? So let's look at the grammar. Связка is a feminine. We're getting a prepositional because of the on the same rope. Одна, don't forget that numbers decline in Russian. It's the worst thing in the whole world. It's so horrible. После 6, с 4 детьми. Oh, это просто ужас. So numbers also get cases in Russian. And I usually don't tell my students this until their very most advanced classes. And then понять is, you guys have seen this verb before with to understand. We just did that song last week. Понимаешь. This is the perfective, though, and this is how you conjugate it. Я пойму, ты поймешь, он поймет, мы поймем, и так далее. Вот. And then who is he? Кто такой? This is nominative. Вот, следующий. Okay, this phrase is super fun and it's really hard to translate. Если парень в горах, не ах. Если сразу раскис и вниз. Okay, so I'm very interested. How would you translate не ах and раскис? Let's take a minute. Everybody should try and translate this. What do you think? Если парень в горах, не ах. And then this word раскис. What do you think? How would you translate it? Based on what you know about this. Если парень в горах, не ах. Если сразу раскис и вниз. Oh, and real quick, while people are giving me their translations, давайте, переведите, пожалуйста, будет интересно. Notice вниз has a Z on the end, but what do we learn? Do we pronounce this as an actual Z? Or do we don't pronounce voiced consonants? When you say Z, your vocal cords are vibrating. You can't do that at the end of a word in Russian. So you need to pronounce this as an S. And when you pronounce it as an S, you realize, oh yeah, раскис and вниз are perfect rhymes. Okay, so let's see. So we're seeing somebody saying ах is not 100%. Мой православный мир says got upset. I'm going to tell you guys a better slang word for this. So если парень в горах, не ах. Well, this is obviously my literal awkward translation. So I would say something like не ах. If he's not special, like he's not anything special. Ни рыба, ни мясо, right? He's not like, he's nothing special. He didn't make you say, ah, something that made you say, ah, like he wasn't anything special. Wasn't something to write home about. Is a good expression. And then the verb раскис comes from раскиснуть, which means to flip out. Right? He like totally freaked out. He flipped out. Or if you want to use a swear word, you could say something like he lost his shit, meaning like he couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle it kind of thing, right? So I would say to flip out, to freak out, to lose his shit, if you're okay with mat, if you're okay with swear words. And then he couldn't handle it. Okay? So if the fellow in the mountains is not anything special, if he straight away freaks out and goes down, let's look at the grammar. We've got парень, again, that's a masculine. Горы, we've got a prepositional plural here, and those have those ach endings. And again, here's that superior rhyme. We have two different parts of speech. We're not just like, it's really hard to explain, but you want your rhymes to be different. You want it to be like a verb and a noun, or an adjective and an adverb. That makes a superior verb or a superior rhyme in Russian. So if in the mountains, в горах не ах, если сразу раскис. So раскиснуть, and notice this is an irregular past tense. We're going to talk about them here in just a minute. And then вниз is ни рода, ни пельмени. That's funny. That's ни рыба, ни мясо means like somebody who's just nothing special. Oh, this is very slang, by the way. Meh, right? They're meh. That's what the people are saying these days, right? They're saying meh. Meh. How's everything going with school? Meh. Meaning like, не очень, right? Kind of thing. So meh. In fact, I'll write it here in the comments so people can see it because it's very slang right now. You can find lots of memes with it. Meh. Неинтересно. Ну, не очень, right? Meh. Very slang. So let's see some other raskis. He was blown away. Oh, that seems like a big one. Yeah, so let's see. Раскиснуть and then вниз. This is really tricky. Someday I will do either a video or I'll have some extra information about when we say вниз, when do we say внизу, when do we say слева, when do we say налево, when do we say сверху, when do we say what else are there? Yeah, so there's all of those weird direction words that are really confusing in Russian. So that word I was saying is meh, right? Like ни рыба, ни мясо, не очень, ни гамбургер, ни кола, ни гамбургер, ни кола. Так, очень хорошо. Those are all very creative. Okay, so next line of the song. Шаг ступил на ледник и сник. Okay, so if you guys remember, we had a word root day where we studied the word root stup. We've got 2 words from that. So hopefully you remember some of those new words you learned. Шаг ступил. Again, we're pronouncing this as a k because you cannot say a voiced consonant at the end of a word in Russian. You cannot say шаг ступил. No, you don't say that. Шаг ступил на ледник и сник. Okay, and then оступился и в крик. Okay, here's another one. We're pronouncing this v as an F because it's getting devoiced because of a consonant cluster where the second consonant is devoiced. This happens a lot in Russian. Okay, here we go. Let's start. Remember, I want to see if anybody remembers how I translated оступился. Remember, it means to do this by accident. When you have a prefix o plus a reflexive ending, it means to do something wrong. Okay, so here we go. Translate. He stepped a step on a glacier or like an iceberg. Ледник can translate in different ways. And fell. Оступился. He stepped wrong. He misstepped, meaning he stumbled or he tripped. And into a shout, right? He stumbled and let out a shout. Kind of thing. So he took a step on the glacier and fell. He stumbled and let out a shout. Let's look at the grammar. Stupil, that's from the verb stupit, masculine past tense. Masculine past tense is just super easy most of the time in Russian. Ледник, he's stepping onto it, but because it's not a feminine singular and it's not an animate, it doesn't change in any way. Скинуть, there's some there's some debate whether this is an actual word or not. Some dictionaries don't treat it as an actual word, but it's, people do say it. So sniknуть means to fall down, and it's one of those irregular masculine past tense. Oh, that's an interesting translation. It took a step on the snowfield and grew weak. Yeah, again, the whole idea here is can this person handle difficult situations? Can this person handle difficult situations like being in the mountains? This is how you find out if a person is your friend or not. Как говорится, по-моему, друг познается в беде. Правда? Like you find out who your true friends are in hard times, right? So again, going up into the mountains, a stressful situation, is how you're going to find out if this person is your friend or not. Again, we're going to talk about these irregular past tenses here in just a second. So, оступился, that's a reflexive. We see that ся on the end. So that means it's a reflexive. And then в крик, it's mainly nominative. Let's see. So those are some of these verbs in past tense that they get an irregular ending. So for example, and it's often these нуть verbs, such as привыкнуть, to get used to something. Он привык, она привыкла. Исчезнуть, он исчез, она исчезла, исчезли. Возникнуть, возник, возникли и так далее. Замерзнуть, замерз, замерзла. Высохнуть, to dry out, высох, высохла, высохло, etc. So those are some of those irregulars, and you just memorize those as you go. And one time I asked my teacher in Russia, well, how do I know which nut verbs get these irregular endings and which ones don't? And she said, oh, well, if it's more than 2 syllables. But she was wrong, or right? And that's mostly true. Oh, sorry. If it's only 2 syllables, it doesn't get an irregular. So that's what she was trying to sell me. She said, if it's only 2 syllables, then it doesn't get an irregular ending. So вернуть, вернул, она вернула, тянуть, тянул, тянула, сунуть, сунул, сунула. And that was right, except for, look at this verb, покинуть, to abandon something, to like leave something behind. Not true. It goes to покинул, покинули, etc. So leave comments below if you know more examples where my teacher was wrong. She tried to say they get irregular endings if they're more than 2 syllables. So let's all work together to prove her wrong. Хорошо, вот здесь много интересных комментариев. Доброе время. Спасибо, Антон. Вот. Сник. Ага, да, вот, видите, вот Антон говорит, сник, такое слово первый раз слышу. Yep. So again, officially in dictionaries right now, it's considered not a word. But obviously it was, and I've heard it before in other places too. So it probably is maybe an old word that's not used anymore. Спасибо за комплимент. Поступил и сник это в прошедшем времени. Oh, yeah, maybe it was a typo, Serge. Maybe, let's see, it should be. Yeah, you're right. It should be. Yeah, sneak, masculine past tense. Masculine past tense. So in this particular form here, it's in the masculine past tense. So real quick, I just want to talk about my Patreon page that exists now. And I'm hoping, я надеюсь, что туда зайдут и русские, потому что я хочу вот создать вот этот клуб разговорного английского и разговорного русского, где мы все будем помогать друг другу. Да, то есть у меня много частных учеников, которые учатся русскому у меня, которые хотят с вами общаться. И, наверное, вы хотите общаться с носителями английского, и я думаю, особенно ведь в это трудное для мира время, особенно нужно в это время, вот, как сказать, особенно нужен вот разговор между людьми, особенно в такое время. То есть я надеюсь, что вы зайдете туда, и вот, вот все эти, я надеюсь начинать вот этот клуб в июне, да. То есть these are some of the what are they called? The benefits or something that you'll get on my Patreon pages. A lot of deleted scenes from videos. So my most recent video I did with Stanislav, I have like deleted scenes from him. He's been here in Washington, D.C. You can hear him say what he thinks about Washington, D.C. Baltimore, ooh, Baltimore's horrible. And then I tell him what I thought of St. Petersburg when I went to St. Petersburg. So just little deleted scenes from my YouTube videos, and then also learning materials like the chart that I just showed you. Anytime we do these live streams, there's extra worksheets you can do that you can download if you're a Patreon member, grammar charts. And then what I'm going to start doing is at the beginning of each week, sending weekly focus emails. This is the problem. People, when they are teaching themselves a language, they have a very hard time getting organized. So these weekly emails are going to help people focus on a specific set of information and give them a goal for the week that will help them progress in the language. Так, the other thing, group chat, Q&A. If you are a member, you can ask questions about translation. You can ask for grammar help, and you can ask for that in our group, as well as the conversation club. And once I get some Russians over there on Patreon, I will start doing vloги на английском, на понятном, на медленном английском, о моей жизни, да. Вот, например, тур моего дома, все по-английски, сколько стоило, сколько стоят дома вот в этом районе, вот, и вот такие дела, которые вас интересуют. So вот, да, это моя мечта, чтобы у меня была такая группа, ну, так называемых студентов, и мы все помогаем друг другу, потому что, наверное, цель у каждого человека — это делать мир лучшим местом для всех. Правда? То есть я думаю, что поскольку у меня есть столько частных учеников, которые хотят общаться с русскими, и, кажется, у меня большинство моих зрителей почему-то русские. Почему бы не общаться друг с другом? Хорошо. Ну вот просто у меня такая мечта. Это мечта. Вот, хорошо. Продолжим. Вот, значит, рядом с тобой чужой, ты его не брони, гони. Okay, so meaning, if your friend in the mountains is a total mess, if he is scared and falling and screaming, then рядом с тобой чужой. Чужой, this is an interesting one to translate. Um, let's do an awkward translation of all of this. Again, this is awkward. This is not a good translation. That means next to you is a stranger. You, him, don't reprimand, chase away. See how Russian is so confusing? If you don't know what is happening, none of this makes sense. So you really need somebody to help you understand it. Okay, now let's do a good translation of it. So that means the guy next to you is not your man. That's very slang. He's not your man. He is not the friend you're looking for. This is чужой is like it could be a stranger, but it could also be like he's not one of us. He's not one of us. This is not your man. This is not the guy you need, kind of thing. Ты его не брони, гони. Okay, брони. Officially, it means reprimand, but we don't really talk like that in English. So if you get mad at somebody, then you chewed them out. Like he was so don't chew him out. Don't like reprimand him. Again, reprimand is very like formal speech. Slang is more to chew somebody out, to chew, yum, 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 right? To chew somebody out. So don't even chew him out. Just chase him off. Just chase him away. Don't waste your time with him. Так. Ты его не брони, гони. Let's look at the grammar here. Значит, so there we go. It's just it conjugation. Рядом с gets instrumental case. Рядом с тобой. And then чужой, this is just a masculine adjective and nominative because you're not doing anything to him. So чужой means foreign, stranger, not one of us kind of thing. Его, that's the accusative / genitive because you're going to chew him out or chase him away. And then бронить, that's the original of that verb, and it's an informal command. Гнать, look how interesting that goes. It kind of changes. Гони, to chase somebody away. And then we get our next verb. There's another one of those. Вверх, to the top. Вверх. Таких не берут. И тут про таких не поют. Okay, so let's start thinking how to translate this. Yeah, I mean, so he says, чужой — это alien, еще. Yeah, that could be чужой, like an alien as well. Although, I mean, yeah, you wouldn't, like when we say, это как называется, иноземец or something, like otherworldly thing, like Martian, for example. Like, yeah, in English, if you say something alien, it literally means like a creature that lives on another planet, or it's a very formal legal speak for нелегальный иммигрант, like an illegal alien. Okay, somebody says something, гони is like let him go or let him leave. Okay, yeah, that's a good one. Таких не берут в космонавты. They're not going to accept those people to become astronauts. Okay, so somebody else, so Serge is saying, don't say anything. Don't say to him anything. Like would be ты его не брони. Yeah, I like that. That's a good way to translate that. Like he's not even worth your reprimand because he's just too stupid for it, kind of thing. Okay, so next line. So let's do our awkward translation. To the top, that kind. Don't take and hear. Wow, this sounds really bad in English. About that kind, don't sing. Okay, so let's do a good translation. By the way, вот интересный момент. Очень легко определить русского человека по такому слову «такой». Они часто, потому что в русском языке он часто используется в речи, и часто, когда русские говорят по-английски, они очень часто употребляют вот это слово such, и вот именно с таким акцентом, вот мягкий че. Such a big, it is such a big privilege for me to, да, it is such, with such a person, like, right? So we don't really say such very often. We say more often that kind of. Like, oh, I hate that kind of people. We don't say, oh, I hate such people. No, we don't talk like that. So we would only really say that for things like, you're such a jerk. You're such an idiot. You're such a, right? So you'd say it more like that. But when we're talking about just pay attention, because yeah, you'll notice that we use a lot more of the phrase that kind for the word такой, or so, especially if it's in front of an adjective as well. So I would say we don't take those kinds of people. We don't take that kind of people to the top, or we don't take that kind of guy or friend to the top. And here we don't sing. They don't sing about those kinds of people here, right? Because they're not special. They don't write songs about that kind of friend. Let's see. I'm seeing some more taki extracurricular. We're talking about all of those now. So now let's look at the grammar here. We've got another one of those direction words that are very confusing in Russian. To the top. Такие, plural, that's getting an accusative / genitive because it's an animate. Брат, берут is from the verb брать, and it's an imperfective, and the conjugations are я беру, ты берешь, он берет, мы берем, вы берете, они берут, etc. Such much. Yeah, so you wouldn't say, no, such much does not make sense. You would have to say so much. So much. What kind of people? That kind of people. He's that kind of guy. Он такой человек, который все время хочет. He's that kind of guy that wants blah, blah, right? So just pay attention. Because yeah, usually we say that kind more often in English in certain contexts. Next, таких, and then look at this one, поют. This is from the verb петь, to sing. So я пою, ты поешь, он поет, мы поем, вы поете, они поют. Very weird conjugations. You would never guess those conjugations looking at the infinitive, right? Okay, next line. Если же он не скулил, не ныл, пусть он хмур был и зол, но шел. Oh, these are such great lines. They're just so smart. So let's look at our awkward translation. If he didn't whimper, didn't whine, perhaps пусть is a hard one to translate. It can be like let him, or maybe he was grumpy, хмурый, and mad. Zol can be either evil or mad, but still walked on. He kept walking. So let's do the grammar breakdown of this. So real quick, actually, let's do a good translation. So if he didn't whimper, didn't whine, and maybe he was grumpy and mad, but he kept on going, then let's do our grammar. Скулить, it's the he past tense. Ныть, oh, this is a great verb. To whine. Я ною, ты ноешь, он ноет, мы ноем, вы ноете. That's a great verb. Хмурый. So here we have those short form adjectives again. Remember, I have that special little thing over on my Patreon that gives you a little bit more information about those short form adjectives. And then we have шел, which is the past tense of the to-go verb идти. Он шел. Так. А когда ты упал со скал, он стонал, но держал. Oh, these are just such good words. So, and when you fell from the cliffs, He groaned. Yes, интересный факт. Иногда стонать переводится на английский как moan. Но осторожно с этим словом, потому что в некоторых контекстах или в большинстве контекстов имеет чуть-чуть сексуальное значение. То есть осторожно немножко. Вот почему я выбрала вот это слово groaned, потому что это менее сексуально. То есть, да. Вот, да. То есть вот это moaned, это немножко неловкое слово в некоторых контекстах. So I translated stонал as to groan instead of to moan. And I was explaining in Russian that moaning has a lot to do with sexual things a lot of times. So, and then держал, he held on to you. Let's look at the grammar behind this. Упасть, он упал. Скалы, look, this is one of those genitive plurals. He fell from the, should he follow? What? I have no idea what this guy is trying to say. Со скал. So genitive plural gets a zero ending when it's genitive plural that was originally a feminine. That's super crazy. Он стонал, держал. Oh, past tense in Russian, so easy. It's so easy. Next. Если шел за тобой, как в бой, на вершине стоял хмельной. So, awkward translation. If he walked after you as if into battle, on the mountain's peak stood sober. So, yeah, if he followed you, is probably what I would say. If he followed you as if going into battle, and he stood on the mountain's peak sober, it's good that he's not drunk, right? Especially up in the mountains where it's dangerous. Okay, so grammar breakdown. Again, there's ET in past tense. За тобой. За can sometimes be accusative and sometimes it can be instrumental. If you're going in pursuit of something, then it's getting instrumental. Например, мама зашла в магазин за хлебом. My mom went down to the store in pursuit of bread, to get some bread, right? Or мы сейчас идем за покупками. We're going shopping. We're buying some things around the town. We're going in pursuit of groceries, for example. Как в бой, you're going to battle, so it's getting accusative case, but because it's not a feminine singular, not an animate, it doesn't change. На вершине, on the top of the mountain, on the peak of the mountain, the very highest part of the mountain, and that's right, you're getting prepositional case, hence the ye ending. Стоять, that's the masculine past tense, стоял. And then хмельной is a masculine adjective, meaning to be sober. Okay? Значит, как на себя самого, положись на него. Okay, and this is the very final lines of the song. Let me know, how would you translate положись на него? I can translate in probably 3 different ways in English. So, awkward translation is, that means, that means that like on your very own self, положись на него. So we've got rely. We've got, what would be some synonyms of to rely on somebody? Can you think of any of that? Let me know in the comments how you would translate положись. Let's do a quick grammar breakdown. So this is interesting. If you say the word sам, meaning like oneself, it also gets cases. And it can mean the same. It's a very hard one to translate into English, but we're getting accusative / genitive case because you're relying on that person. And then this is the command form of положиться. So the formal command form would be положитесь. Положитесь. Yeah, good. So Антон говорит, что можно доверять. Можно доверять ему. Да? Так, очень хорошо. So you can положись на него, like literally means to count on somebody, to rely on somebody. And then also it could mean to trust somebody as well. And then на, and we're getting accusative case / genitive because it's a masculine animate as well. So, это все на сегодня. Я надеюсь, что было интересно. I'm very proud of you Russian learners for learning a Vysotsky song. That is not easy. Again, think of Bob Dylan. That is a very hard, that's a very hard poetic language to understand. So аплодирую, молодцы. And by the way, if anybody on Patreon is able to request certain songs, if you want me to talk about certain songs or certain poems, и, кстати, русский вы можете предложить, например, английскую песню, и я постараюсь перевести. Так. И это все на сегодня. I believe I have a live stream scheduled for next week too. Сейчас я посмотрю. Oh, yes, I do have another live stream scheduled for next week. And so I hope you guys will all be back. I'm hoping to do at least one per week now that I have more free time. So again, I hope we make this a tradition. И спасибо, пожалуйста, что вы пришли. И оставьте комментарии внизу, что было интересно, какие песни Высоцкого вам нравятся. Вот, очень интересно, какие песни надо знать, чтобы лучше понимать русскую культуру, например. So what Vysotsky songs are very important in Russian culture. Вот, хорошо, вот, спасибо еще раз всем, это все. До свидания, хорошего вам дня или вечера. До свидания.